Morning, everyone. Hope everybody's doing well. Had your coffee, bottle of water, and we're here for something that's really, really exciting. Anybody that knows me knows I pretty much don't get excited about anything. But right now, if I could take my jacket off, I got goosebumps running on both sides of my arm. So while we're here, it's something very, very important. And the best way that I could describe why we're here is to tell you a quick little story. And the story began right outside these double doors right here. One day I came over to JA, and I was meeting with Trent and another board member. They was just giving me a tour of the facility. And I was in awe of the facility and what it had to offer for kids. But one of the main things that I was in awe of is I had never heard of the place. I'm a Nashville native. I grew up in 12 South before it's the 12 South it is now. And so I just thought to myself, if I haven't heard about this, and I grew up in Nashville, I know my friends have not heard about this place. How many kids and parents coming up right now have not heard about this place, right? And so as we were sitting down and me and Trent were talking, and he was explaining how different counties and how they have great attendance through the JA programs. And he was talking about, we have some metro attendance, but it's not enough. We need more. And thinking how I think, I said, well, look, let's just put some people together, some community stakeholders, some organizations, some banks, whomever that believes in this. This is for the kids. Let's put everybody together. Let's just do it ourselves. And at that moment in time, he said, it's funny you said that. He said, I've been talking to somebody else, and they're kind of preaching the same story. I said, oh, really? I said, well, who is it? He said, Terry Turner, over at Pinnacle. I said, oh, really? Okay. So the conversation kind of stopped there. And I went on about my way. It led to a board seat. And so then I went back to the bank. I work at Citizens Bank. We're located in northern Nashville, specifically in this 37208 zip code that you've been hearing about. And most people know about this stat that I'm about to tell you about. But when I found out that 37208 has the highest incarceration rate of any zip code in the country, then the light bulb went off. And I was like, wow. It went from a conversation between me and Trent and talking about Terry to now we actually have to do something. Something has to happen. Because now I fully understand being in that North Nashville community, everybody's not on the same playing field. And so how do we make that playing field a little bit more level? We got to go get the kids. And we got to get them at that age where they're most impressionable, that middle school age, that fifth grader, that sixth grader, that seventh grader, that eighth grader, right? And so the conversation just continued, and it continued, and it continued. And so that's the reason why you're here today is we wanted to bring the community stakeholders together, and we wanted to fix the community, starting with the kids, with the people and the stakeholders of the community. This is not about politics. This is not about any of that. This is about us coming together as one to fix a problem that we absolutely believe needs to be fixed. What we need, the reason why you're in this room, it was a specific invitation because we believe that every single person in this room is in here for a purpose and for a reason. We need your influence, we need your network, and we also need your resources to put this together. And I'm happy to say that one of the first people that stood up and said, you can have my influence, you can have my network, and you can have my resources, was Terry Turner. And so with that being said, I would like to introduce Terry Turner, President and CEO of Pinnacle Bank.
Corey, thank you for that introduction, and J.A., thank you for hosting us. It's a great spot for us to be. Panelists, we appreciate your involvement. David, thanks for your leadership here to lead us in a discussion. Nashville, my guess is all of us love Nashville, Tennessee. We're in a great spot. We're in a fabulous spot. It's an unusual spot. I get an opportunity to visit all over the country, and I watch other cities and how they grow and what's going on. There just aren't places like this. We're in a great spot. We've had fabulous growth over an extended period of time. We've added jobs. Corporate relocations continue to flock in here. My belief is that's going to continue for the foreseeable future. I think we're set up for great growth for an extended period of time. I think that's the way it's going to work. And what is really important to me is that we take everybody with us. It's going to grow. There's going to be a lot of prosperity. And what is important to me is that we take everybody with us. We can't afford to continue to have this great divide where some are winning and some aren't. You know, we got to figure out how to take everybody with us. One of the things that's so important to me, if you'll just indulge me 1 second, man, I've been blessed. I have been blessed. I've had unbelievable opportunities. I've made lots of money. I've made lots of money for other people. It's just been a fabulous business career. One of the reasons, in addition to the fact that the sovereign God of the universe has blessed me, is that I was blessed to grow up in a home where my dad left every Monday morning in a suit and tie and traveled all over the Southeast as a sales manager for Ford Motor Company. Came in every Friday night in that same suit and tie. For years later in his career, he built fleet and leasing programs for Ford Motor Company. I watched him work, get up and leave early in the morning. He came home many nights at 10 o'clock at night so he could have supper with his family and go back to work. We'd eat supper and go to bed because he's trying to hit a deadline. Sat around the table and talked about who's getting fired, who's getting ahead, who's getting promoted, why are they getting promoted, who's getting left out, all those kinds of things. And so I heard all that discussion. And so I graduated from college at 21, went to work in business, but I promise you, I knew what the game was, I knew what the rules were, and I knew how to win. And so I had a great advantage just because that dinner table I sat around all the time and heard about business and how it worked and all those kinds of things. And I'm convinced that's the biggest part of how I launched a successful career. And so what I'm about is trying to make sure that we do that same thing for people that don't get to sit around that same dinner table I did, but need exposure to what the game is, what the rules are, how you get ahead, how you win in the game, all those kinds of things. And so that's why I get so excited about this particular program. We're here in Nashville. It's going to grow and be prosperous. We can take everybody with us if we will, but to Corey's point, if we don't reach in here and grab on to these 5th, 6th, 7th graders and teach them about how business works and how you get ahead and how you win the game, we're going to continue to have divided prosperity here. And so that's what I'm working against and what I'm working for here. So anyway, I just make that point to you. I am so excited to be involved in this program. Corey and I are willing to invest our resources in it, and I believe that we can draw other people to invest their resources in it. You know, it's just a simple thing I look at in Williamson County, and some of the comparisons are unfair. I don't mean to make them, but I just say, look, in Williamson County, virtually every public school student's participating in junior achievement programs. Not many are in Davidson County. Man, that just doesn't, that's an inequity that's really easy for us to solve. Man, there's some hard stuff to solve, but that one's not. That's an easy thing for us to solve. So anyway, that's my excitement about this program, and I appreciate you coming and being involved here and participating in the discussion, listening to the discussion, and hopefully we'll find ways to make sure that we're taking everybody with us with all the prosperity that we're no doubt going to enjoy here in Nashville. So, Corey, thank you.
So with that being said, let's get this underway. And so this event starts this conversation. This is where it starts here. There are going to be executable steps that we take after this, but you know, it all starts with one conversation. And so what we wanted to do was, we wanted to bring up some heavy hitters in the community, some heavy hitters in the Nashville community as it pertains to just community resources, to nonprofit, to education, to whatever it may be that we might need, that we need to get across to make sure that what we're trying to do actually takes place. And so with that being said, we brought together a panel of folks. And as I call out each panelist's name, do you want them to come up then? Okay, so the first panelist is Mr. Clifton Harris. He's the president and CEO of Urban League of Middle Tennessee. He's a leading source for equity across the community of Nashville. Give that man a round of applause, please. Next, we have Mr. Ashford Hughes. He's the Executive Officer for Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion at Metro Schools, and he's doing the same thing that we're talking about right now. This man does this every day for his everyday job at Metro. Give that man a round of applause, please. And then we have the man that basically is the driving force that brought all this together. When you sit down and talk to this guy, I don't know too many people that has passion for certain things like I do and can exude that passion more than me. But Mr. Trent Klingsmith, he's the president of Junior Achievement of Middle Tennessee. He's an advocate for kids. If anybody has been around this man and see what he does on an everyday basis, it's very, very, very something to be commended. So, Mr. Klingsmith. Next, we have Miss Angela Crane Jones. She's the CEO of the Nashville Business Incubation Center. She helps push economic inclusion forward by fostering a new generation of business owners and leaders, and we're glad to have her on our panel as well. And then we also have Miss Sabrina Franklin. She's the Financial Counseling Manager for the United Way of Greater Nashville. She's on the front lines of helping Nashville families better themselves by improving their financial prospects. Thank you. And, you know, when you have a panel like this, you got to have somebody kind of keep everybody in line. And so who we have today, he's a leader in discussions of this nature. He's become one of Nashville's leading voices for equity by championing conversation among a broad cross sections in our city. So without ado, David Plazas from the Tennessean. Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much, Corey, and thank you, Terry, for those inspiring words. I'm so glad to be here, and I appreciate the invitation, Trent and Joe. And this is just an amazing panel to talk about these very equity issues. And I can't wait for you all to see this building. I got an early tour earlier today from Trent, and it's absolutely amazing. So I wanted to ask each panelist, starting with Clifton and going down, just initially tell us a little bit about who you are, and then give us one big idea for how do we prepare youth for the economy. And let's start with Clifton.
I'm just a country kid, you know, from the tobacco fields of North Carolina, and let me give my disclaimer now. I know a little bit about a whole lot and a whole lot about nothing. I've had the pleasure of having some great minds, you know, around me in my upbringing, and so now I get to sit at the helm of the Urban League of Middle Tennessee, who has been serving the community for over 53 years, and we're part of a larger network, you know, of urban leagues across the country, you know, of 90 affiliates, you know, that has been around since 1910, serving the community. And so that's a little bit known about, you know, who I am.
And the one big idea for how do we get the kids
and the one
involved
big
in the
idea,
economy?
you know, I truly believe that if kids can see it, then they can be it. You know, but we got to be able to show them how, you know, to move beyond what they don't know to the realm of possibilities of what's out there waiting on them.
Thank you. Sabrina.
Hi, good morning. My name is Sabrina Franklin. I am one of the senior counseling managers at the Financial Empowerment Center, which is the baby of United Way and the mayor's office. Of course, right? Can you hear me? Okay, perfect. Let me repeat. My name is Sabrina Franklin, and I am the Senior Counseling Manager at the Financial Empowerment Center, which is the child of United Way and the Mayor's Office. We offer one-on-one financial counseling to anybody who can fog a mirror. One big idea, and I love the gentleman that spoke in the khaki suit, because that's how I remember people. He hit the nail on the head, because I was so fortunate to be raised by my grandma, and my mom too, but the generation that my grandma came from is the generation of oversharing. So I was able to hear a lot about things that I could not connect the dots to until I got older. So one big idea, which is absolutely vital, is we need to have these kids in the kitchen when the meal is cooking. They need to know everything. There's nothing that is too much or there's no such thing as too soon. They will connect the dots. Eventually, we have to let them know what's going on.
Thank you. Trent?
So I'm going to steal that line because that's what we're all about. And that's what JA's mission is all about. It's about connecting the dots and about helping them. We got to start earlier, right? We got to start showing the way earlier. And that's what I love about what we do at JA. And I love the fact that everybody in this room has been, at some point in time, been a sponsor or supporter of this. And Corey, I'm sorry we didn't connect earlier. And nobody has more energy than me, but maybe Corey does, okay? But it is about connecting the dot and giving the kids the experiences to show that they can, what they can be, giving them that value of self. When kids believe in themselves, when we believe in ourselves, we can move mountains. So it's about doing that. And when we can get our kids to that point in life and start showing them when they go through BizTown that they can be the CEO of a bank or they can be the CFO of the restaurant, they start believing in themselves, man, what's next type of thing. So that's what I believe is the most important thing that we're trying to do here, David, with our programs. So,
Thank you. Ashford?
First and foremost, I'm a father of 2 boys. I'm a husband. I'm an advocate in the community. I serve as the co-chair with Lionel Matthews for My Brother's Keeper Network in Nashville. My day-to-day job, I serve as the executive officer for DE&I in Metro Public Schools, where I focus on how do I create the conditions by which students have the opportunity to excel and get the resources and the support they need right now. I also manage the team of individuals that run our school options process. So we are a choice district, and we allow families to make decisions on where they want to go to school, and I manage that operation. The big idea that I would take, not to continue to piggyback off of what I heard, but one of the first things we must do is continue in education to evaluate and make certain that our students are literate in 2 phases, not only just reading, but literate in the economy. And that is beyond just learning how to write a check or balance a checkbook, but understanding how money has value, how that value adds up to what takes place in community. And I believe that can start early, but it must continue on because we have to create those analytical and cognitive skills that kids can ask and think for themselves. Does this role fit well for me? Does this job benefit my community? And if so, how? And if we can continue to create those opportunities by which kids can think to say, I want to build this in my community, I want to own the supply chain, then I think we will see more progress moving forward for particular communities that have been economically marginalized over the last decade plus.
Thank you so much.
Good morning. I'm Angela Crane Jones. I'm the CEO of the Nashville Business Incubation Center. The Incubation Center has been around for about 35 years, and our main goal at the Incubation Center is to help create jobs and wealth. And when we work with small business owners, is to help them create 5 or more jobs because they tend to hire individuals just like themselves. And as we know, as Nashville is growing, getting them to $100,000 is great, but for our minimum is getting them to $1 million. But also, I'm very excited. I'm like Corey. I don't really get excited about much, but listening to Corey this morning and then Terry, I'm excited and for 2 reasons. You know, one, I grew up over in Edge Hill as well. Had no idea about JA. I found out about JA about 2 or 3 years ago, but again, didn't know how to access it. And I drive my child, I live in Davidson County, and I drive my child 25 minutes across town to get access to better resources. And that's my way of contributing to Metro, although I could put my child in private school. I'm excited about hearing Terry speak this morning because anybody that's around me, the one thing I talk about all the time, we always talk about access to capital, and that's excellent. But what about the social capital? Having that conversation and having, you know, the resources that I can pick up the phone and call Terry and say I need X, Y, and Z, and then he's gonna open his Rolodex to me. That's what's important to me. But my one big idea, or my BHAG, my big, hairy, audacious goal, is for personal finance to be a requirement in schools. And also, we're educating. That's theory, that's great, but we also need to expose. So that's why I'm excited about this conversation here today, because if they can't see themselves in it, it's very, it's difficult. And I come from, my husband, I'm married, I have a 12-year-old child, but the piece that still I feel that is missing is we need to build as a community. I grew up in a community. I feel like I'm successful today because I grew up listening to my grandmother as well as my mother talking about saving, and you can have whatever you want to have. So my big goal is to personal finance in schools.
Thank you very much, Angela. I have several questions. I'm going to split them up among various panelists. So this first one is for Angela and Ashford. And Terry had talked about, how do we bring people forward, everybody forward, when it comes to the progress and growth that we have here in Nashville. So what are the barriers to entry, and how do we overcome those barriers? We could start with Angela and then Ashford, please.
Again, for us at the incubation, I'm gonna speak from entrepreneurship. It's, again, having access to capital, also having access to social capital. And on the entrepreneurship side, a lot of times individuals don't see themselves, so they don't realize they can be as successful as Terry. Like, as Terry said, when he went to college, he knew what the game was. He knew how to go out and execute. I work with many individuals that they have great vision, but they don't know how to create a strategy and then go and execute. And I think one of the barriers is allowing us to have more access to, when I say allow, meaning we come together as a community and build those individuals and open up our Rolodexes to those individuals so they have access to capital as well as social capital. But it comes with starting with educating and educating early.
Thank you. Ashford?
I think my question will be, my answer will be twofold. So one of the barriers, I believe, oftentimes is self-inflicted barriers. How do we engage families? Because it's not just about the student. We have to engage families early on so that families see the importance and the value of postgraduate education, see the value of entrepreneurship, and they have to see that value within their communities and those people that look like them coming from their communities. We have to break down that barrier by reestablishing how do we communicate with families. COVID has made us make different changes in that approach, but if we don't find different ways to approach and engage families early and often throughout that process and find out ways to engage community organizations that families trust to walk them through the process, then we will still have these barriers of entry. I think another barrier is, as we continue to hear about, is access. How do we make certain that we provide that access, right? Everything I think of, I think through the lens of equity. And right now, access in various communities that we have is not available. When we look at people saying we have 2 different Nashvilles, I would break it down. We probably have about 4 different Nashvilles. Depending on which economic landscape you are, you could be doing very well. You could be, man, I'm 2 checks away, or you could be like, I am at the margins right now. And that is scattered all throughout our school district. Right now, we have 60+% of our families that are economically disadvantaged. Our mobility rate is upwards of 60%. So that is telling us we need to find ways to partner with community and with the city infrastructure that we have to be a model for what we want to do. As Angela talked about, the city has to model how do we engage Black, brown, women-owned businesses in community, because we know that 60% of our people that work in our city work for small businesses. How do we break down those structures where kids see this is important because I see it in my community? And until we begin to really address that in education and in what the city makeup is doing economically, those barriers will not be broken.
Thank you, Ashford. This next question is for Sabrina and Clifton. What do young people need to know about the workforce? And we could start with Sabrina and then go to Clifton.
Really good question. And they need to know that it looks so different. It can look corporate. It could look from a self-employment perspective. It could look like their skill being fostered into something that can be income producing. It doesn't look one way, just like people don't look one way. So that's something that if we can expose our kiddos to many, many things, somebody selling on the side of the road, or you're really good at, especially now in this age of technology and YouTube, and there's just so many different ways to be self-sufficient, and they need to know that it could be their skill, whatever they're really good at, that could be it for them. It doesn't have to look one way.
Thank you. Clifton?
Yeah, I would add that young people need to learn and understand that corporate America has a DNA as well, and a culture within corporate America, and they need to learn that and have patience with it, and not get upset and walk out because they don't get to have their way, right? So there's some soft skills training that needs to happen with our young folks, so that they can understand how to compete in that culture and truly understand the DNA that they have just walked into.
Thank you. And I want to start this next question with Trent, and if any other panelists would like to react as well. Because you work, you lead JA, you have a lot of contact with kids. We were certainly talking about that this morning. What do employers need to know about young people today?
Simply put, every child wants to succeed. Every child wants the opportunity. We talked about it earlier. Terry and I were talking about it as well. I had a mentor in my life. I've had multiple mentors in my life. We talked about your grandmother in the kitchen and so forth. These kids need mentors. And I'm stealing Clifton's line, but the kids can't be what they can't see. And so that's what, JAA's secret sauce is the volunteers that get involved in the classroom. We want you to be out there in front of our kids so they can see what they can be, and they can hear your story. I talk with kids all the time, and they think an entrepreneur is that individual that had one idea and immediately pitched it and they were successful. We all know this because we've seen this. Entrepreneurs are successful because they failed multiple times and they never stopped. So that's our business owners, they need these kids. They need these kids to be their future employees. We need these kids to be successful because they're also going to be the individuals that are going to buy the goods and services for the community. They're going to be the leaders of tomorrow. So that's what our community needs to and our companies need to know is they can be involved. They can help get involved with organizations and the nonprofits in town, not just JA, but be involved because these kids do want to be successful. They just need to see the path there.
Would any other panelists like to take this question?
Yeah, I think it's important to really know when we talk about what young people want. So young people now, and I'm not old by any stretch of the imagination, so let me first say that. So let me tell you what I know that people want. So if you think about it now, let's look at the data, because I always like to talk about what I can prove, right? Not just my ideas all the time, my personal beliefs. Look at the data. Young people are not staying around 50 years for that gold watch, doing the same thing, working 80, 90 hours a week, right? Quality of life. Employers need to think about, young people today care about quality of life issues. Will I be able to spend time with my family? Will I be able to serve on boards and commissions that I care about globally in the community? Will I be able to have a place where I can go and have a wellness center? Young people care about quality of life. They don't want to work 60 hours a week trudging along just to make somebody else money. That's first and foremost. Young people care to have their voices heard and lifted up in the workplace about issues that are beneficial to them, whether it's benefit packages, whether it's how many hours do we week, whether it's paid medical leave. These are issues that young people care about, and that is why they're a very mobile workforce. While they work 3 to 4 years and they move on to something else. Again, they are not going to stay in your company for 40 or 50 years if they work in 80 hours a week and there is no outlet for them to experience a better, enhanced quality of life that is not leading to suicide, stress, every other negative indicator that you see. I think finally, one of the most important things that young people want is they want to know how they can bring value to the company to change the social environment around them. Yes, everybody understands profit is important in business and is the key factor in business, but young people today also want to have social determinants to say, the job that I'm in, the role that I'm in is going to positively affect the community around me because we are all interconnected. Transportation, business, education, it is all interconnected. And if my role is not leading to a better community, I don't necessarily want to work for this company.
Thank you. My next question is for Clifton and Angela. Would you talk a little bit about the challenges that COVID has created and what can be done to address those challenges now? Let's start with Clifton and then go to Angela.
Well, I think the data, as Ashford has stated, the data has proven, that, COVID, has created a lot of different challenges, for people of color, specifically African Americans. And we found ourselves, as a result of COVID, in jobs, low-paying jobs, that were essential, but yet, they were the first ones, to get cut. And so that has had a devastating effect within the community. We've lost a lot of businesses as a result of that. And, going back to normal, there is no going back to normal, right? We got to find a way, to better equip, better prepare, our folks, our leadership, in order, to move forward, with a paradigm shift, that properly prepares them, for closing the wealth gap so that we can create, the wealth, that needs to occur in our community. Over the last 20 years, if we had just closed worked on closing the wealth gap, that could have created, over $2.7 trillion in income, in our community, and we've lost over $16 trillion as a result of not addressing this issue. And COVID, I think, just kind of pulled back the covers and say, we got a much deeper issue, that involves systemic racism, that involves a lot of inequality across the board in a lot of areas, and so, and now we're paying for the sins of the past.
Thank you, Clifton. Angela?
From an entrepreneurship standpoint, what I saw from our clients and individuals in the community was the, again, lack of access to capital. So they didn't have the banking relationships to tide them over because the whole world is closed, for 4 to 6 weeks because we all went home and there was nothing going on. But also, it truly exposed the digital divide that we already knew about, but when you have minority businesses that don't leverage technology, and now in order to do business with a restaurant or someone that may have someone that has a physical store, they don't have an e-commerce platform to be able to continue selling because, as we all know, people were still buying. They were just not coming into, physical locations. So for us, one of the things that we were able to help a lot of the individuals in the community were get those e-commerce websites set up, train them on the technology and how to leverage it, and then leverage our relationships that we had with, the Pinnacle banks, the local banks like Studio Bank, us having access to capital and having those relationships, we could tie them over until they had the websites up and had dollars coming in. So the biggest thing that was, to me, that was exposed is that we need to ensure that people are financially literate and as well as digital literate.
Thank you very much. Ashford and Sabrina, what is the best way we can insert the equity equation, the equity conversation into the workforce conversation? Let's start with Ashford and then Sabrina.
I don't think you can divorce the two. I think on this lens all the time, and I was involved in this work before, it was equity and inclusion, when it was just how we enhance the quality of life for individuals, right? I think when we try to divorce the two as if equity is this other thing on the side over here, then you fracture, the non-truthful version of this. So equity is the infrastructure of everything, right? When we look at banking relationships, the fact that many of our small businesses, right, did not have those banking relationships. Some was based on equity, the access to those bankers, right? And we think about the relationship to money and access, a lot of that is based on relationship, right? How do we have access to the relationships to those banking practices? I think when I think about how the equity conversation is invoked in here, what are we doing as a city to make certain that every community has what they need to be successful? That every community has a hub of economics to thrive where the money stays within its community in order to support those individuals that are living there. We can look throughout the city and we can look at various community hubs where the economics, where the banking relationships are thriving, and you see a thriving community. You see schools that have thriving partnerships where the education and the GPAs and the college tuition and the graduation rates are higher. Then you can go and look in the various other communities where those economic hubs are not thriving, and you see what happens with those communities that leads to 37208 and incarceration rates, right? I think where the equity jumps in is to say, and the Brookings Institute has done at least 2 or 3 studies in Nashville over the last 4 or 5 years that tells Nashville's leaders we have to have and create and develop an inclusive economy that works for everyone, particularly around small business. But how do we go about doing that? Fortunately enough, in my time in the mayor's office, we passed one of the first policies ever that really took into account race and gender when we were doing vendor relationships. And that was based on a disparity study that stated there was passive-aggressive discrimination in the utilization of minority-owned and women-owned businesses in metro government. We have to form a more inclusive economy if we want it to be stable. The economy, COVID also exposed many in our community, many in here, whether it's personal or business was unstable economically. We were 1-2 paychecks away, two areas away of being under, right? We see many of our restaurants, many of our culinary businesses are still trying to get back. What we have to do when we want to marry equity with workforce is understand the relationship between two, how we can't move forward in conversations about how do we have things for all, how do we provide access, if we don't understand the root cause of the issues and addressing root cause of the economic issues in our community. And they all start with access and relationships to capital, to money, and what kids see.
Thank you. Sabrina, again, the question is, how can we best insert the equity conversation into these discussions about workforce?
He went big picture, so I'm gonna go small. Very good answer, I loved it. But let's start at the ground level. Let's start at the foundational level. I mean, workforce eventually will be a thing. We are born and we go to school and school and school and more school, and then eventually in the workforce, right? Parents who are in the workforce, they have a lot of influence. We are them currently, and it has to be intentional all around. So, small picture, we have to. Equity is fairness. So we can talk about funds and making sure the child gets funds, funding for this or that, but that doesn't guarantee exposure. That doesn't guarantee that resources go to these children. Companies, workforce can invest in training, but if we're not being really intentional with who gets what they need, because not everybody needs the same thing, and if that assessment is not done, then we miss people. And just like the students are being missed. So we have a really, yes, you can't divorce the two. They go hand in hand. So my response is as simple as we need to make sure that every child gets exposed to the same thing. Just like we are taught ABC and 1, 2, 3 at a very young age, we need to be taught about harnessing our skills and figuring out who you are and how to foster that. And the school needs to make sure that there are safe places and safe people to talk to kind of help encourage us individually. As a workforce, we need to support our staff, and because these are families, their moms, their dads, and whatever they're not getting at work, we're all a community, the kids aren't getting. So it needs to be a from the ground up type of flow and from the bottom down type of flow.
Thank you. Clifton, I think you had something to say?
Yeah, I just wanted to say, that, equity doesn't happen unless there is committed intentionality. It's just not going to happen, right? I mean, if you look at how our education system for the state of Tennessee is funded, there's nothing equitable about the funding formula that we use, and it has to be changed, and we need to be intentional about, changing it. Every one of us, we had someone that was committed and intentional, about getting us to the pathway that we're on so that we can arrive at where we are right now in the seats, that we're sitting. There was committed intentionality in that, and so I just don't think equity happens, without, the intentionality of being committed to it.
Ashford?
I'm gonna come back to big picture, bring it on down, but I think the conversation as we've had right now around equity seems to, and one of my mantras in my office is that we work on fixing injustice, not kids. Far too often we put it on marginalized communities and families to solve the solutions all the time. I think from a workforce and equity perspective, not only asking the kids, hey, what can we do to help you get there, but how are we asking those same questions to employers, to the business leaders? What are you willing to do to change behavior so that there is access and opportunity for more individuals to come and be a part of what you're doing, right? We have to also, you talk about intentionality, equity again is about getting students, getting families what they need when they need it. These questions have to be put back on businesses as well if they want the skilled, knowledgeable workforce that is going to help them get what they're trying to do as well.
And that has to be supported from the top down, Ashford, not from the bottom up.
Absolutely.
So Trent, building upon this, I'd like to ask you, what are the key qualities people going to the workforce need to be successful?
So we talk about soft skills all the time. It's obviously the education and the work that Metro's doing, and so is so important. I mean, every child has to have that education, but they also need the soft skills and they need the life skills to be successful. I'm always of the belief, if we can give the child hope, if we can bring the opportunity that they can be what they want to be in life by showing them and giving the opportunity, it's all about experiential. Take the education piece, put it in their hands, let them apply it, show them that they can do it. We can change their lives forever. So, I mean, guys, I'm to keep it simple, stupid. I'm not as smart as these people, but I do know this. I know that if we can help a child understand the value of who they are, we can change their direction forever. And we got phenomenal companies in this town. We've got phenomenal partnerships with our educators. We need more volunteers. We need people to be in front of our kids to show them who they can be. JA's here to help with that. We're here to be the partner, to connect the dots, to show the path, the place and space. I got off on a tangent, but you know I am, David. It's just we've got to put more effort into helping our kids be successful and empowering them for success.
I want to pose this to all the panelists. This is related to your answer, and I've been reading a lot more this past year about how soft skills really have to become those hard skills in the sense that you talked about relationships, you talked about communication, but for kids who don't have those dinner conversations, how do they learn that, and how do they develop those skills to be successful in networking, in asking for money, in selling, et cetera, et cetera? Would anyone like to take this question first?
I mean, I'm gonna answer the question, but I want to come back to something Trent said. While it's also important, I'm gonna go with this lens again, while it's important that kids understand the value of who they are and what they need to do, again, I put it back on a corporate community, I put it back on the larger Nashville community. How do they value the identities and who these individual young people are based off of their culture? So how are these corporate entities creating culturally responsive employees, culturally responsive board culture, to know that not everybody is coming from Montgomery Bell Academy community? Some kids like myself are growing up where they may hear gunshots every night. How does that factor in understanding who their lived experience is, not holding them to this is who they are permanently, but how do we take that into their lived personal identity when we engage and connect with them? I think to your point, how do we work on kids to move forward with the relationship skills? One thing that I think kids need to recognize, and this is on my journey, instead of focusing on just who's gonna pay me the most money, I always focus on how do I add value to the organization that I'm being a part of, because then the money will follow if I am able to add value to that organization. How do we teach them to be a person of value, right? And I think that comes with continuously having either mentors, working with the community, seeing organizations like JA, like Pinnacle, like Citizens Bank, in the community, in the school community, working with community over and over again on a consistent basis, not just a one-off, working with Pastor Drumright and others to make certain we have mentors so that kids can understand what it takes to thrive in this economy right now. I think it has to be embedded in the school curriculum. How do we, in the school curriculum, focus on those relationship building skills? How do we have time in class that is not just like, okay, it's Friday, we're just gonna have a good time Friday, but how do we use this time Friday to start to build interrelational skills between student to student, student to teacher, so they can become accustomed to looking people in the eye? For some cultures, that is something that is not, that is seen as a negative or a disrespect. So how do we understand that when we're teaching kids these skills? But it starts education, but then it also starts with how do we help educate families on what their children need as well. I go back to the importance of engaging families differently, because these students don't live by themselves. They live with the support group that is their family or their caregivers, and they have to be a part of the training equation as well.
Thank you. Would anybody else like to take this question? Sabrina?
So I have this crazy mind, the way I think. And for the longest, I've always thought, why aren't we connecting with older people the way it used to be? Why is there a bunch of wisdom in nursing homes and senior facilities, right? Why can't we connect our young people to that wealth of information? The soft skill building capabilities that can be fostered by just communicating with somebody who's in their 70s, who is from the generation of oversharing, the patience that a child would have to talk to an older person, that is amazing and needed in the workforce. The flexibility, the adaptability that can be just from having a conversation or two with somebody who's like in their 80s or 90s, right? The disconnect, the isolation that fosters insecurity, the lack of knowledge, it's all now we're seeing the effects of it, just from disconnecting with our older folks.
Yeah, there's something to be said, about citizenship in the schools, right? Teaching, what it really truly means, to be a good citizen. And to Ashford's point, it has to be reinforced in the support groups. I remember, at least I will say, in the black church, as a black kid growing up, you had to say your Easter speech. No ifs, ands, and buts about it. You had to get up and you had to open your mouth before people and say your Easter speech, and that was part of being able to make eye contact and to talk to people, right? And to shake people's hands. And I think, that, it also has to be carried out, in the organizations that are serving youth. You can't assume that they're getting it at home because they're not getting it, so you have to reinforce it, when you have access, to the kids, to teach them, to look people in the eye, to shake their hand, to carry on a conversation, to have dignity about yourself, pull up your pants, and make a complete sentence. And don't get upset because you don't get to have your way, right? So those are all things that we have to reinforce because kids are going from a social, emotional perspective, we have no clue as to what some of these kids are going through on a daily basis, right? And for them, it is just about surviving, Kids can tell you what the pathway that it takes to get to be the MVP in the NBA, but they cannot tell you the pathway that it takes to be the CEO of Citizens Bank or Pinnacle Bank, or any other institution and stuff. So we got to help them with the soft skills to be able to get there.
Thank you very much. As we're coming to the conclusion of the panel, I have a question for all the panelists. On a personal note, I want to start from Angela and then go down to Clifton. What made you successful, and what was the best advice you received from your mentors?
I think I'm going to piggyback off of what Sabrina said. I grew up every summer with my grandmother, so I know how to handle when something's not going well at work. I know not to pop off, at the mouth. That came from my grandmother. I learned, how to be strategic and look at the bigger picture from being with my grandparents. But I also had a 5th grade teacher that invested in me early on because she knew what was going on in my home life. And literally from 5th grade to the day I graduated from from college, she continually invested in me. And when I say invested in me, not only her time, but as well as her treasure and opening up her Rolodex. That's why I'm real big on that, because I learned those are the things that people need to have in their life. But I think what we've all talked about that I've benefited from is community. I grew up where if I wasn't doing something correctly, someone in the community could say something to me. But I also learned early on where my mother worked, I could see where individuals were able to do things that my mother wasn't able to do, but how to maneuver, and they had mentors. And so I sought out mentors. And so I've been successful with, there again, having a community around me, and I've built a community around me for the past 5 years. But I'm going to leave the one thing that we hadn't talked about, but I think that's what we're essentially talking about today, is sponsorship. I just learned about sponsorship 6 years ago. We always talk about mentorship, but we don't talk about sponsoring, someone that's actually taking you under your wing and moving you throughout the process.
Thank you very much, Angela. Ashford?
Yeah, I'll try to answer this, not in my pastor voice, but I'm going to speak to this. So I think when we talk about what has made me successful, I still think I'm on a trajectory to be successful. I don't really think I'm there yet, but what has allowed me to get where I am today is kind of understanding my why, right? Why do I wake up every day and do this work of engaging communities to enhance quality of life? And part of my why is based off of, I've had 3 friends that have been killed by gun violence in the same 5-block radius in Knoxville, right? Understand my why changing my major at Tennessee State was to make certain that I had access to individuals that passed policy that kept young black and brown men either dead or in jail, right? My other why, as I have grown over, is to say I have 2 kids, and I understand what my expectations are for their education, and I want to make certain that every kid in Metro Public Schools has access to that same opportunity. So I'm grounded in my individual why, and being grounded in that why allows me to focus on 2 things. Like I said before, how do I put a premium? The biggest commodity that I have is a relationship, a positive relationship, and how do I keep those relationships thriving, and how do I add value to the organization I'm in, and how do I add value to the relationships I build? Relationships, as I try to tell my son and others, is the #1 commodity that you have. If you don't have a good relationship, then you will be stuck where you are today if you don't have quality relationships. Over time, I also see that, I could have gone corporate and done things in the corporate world, but I know, again, addressing my why, that's not where I need to be. That is not purposeful for me. My understanding of who I am took over time. I came to TSU to be a business marketing major because I wanted to make a lot of money. Through tragedy and triumph, I changed to political science because I really wanted to have an effect on the government and the people around me. So staying grounded in my why and focusing on relationships is something, and I've never really had many mentors, to be honest with you. I've sought out oftentimes, but in our community, we have families, fathers, men working multiple jobs, trying to deal with what they're doing with their own kids, that I had to seek out some, and I get advice. And the 2 pieces of advice, relationships and add value. So I work on that every day, and I work on making certain kids have what they need to be successful by my actions.
Thank you so much. Trent?
His answer. I grew up a military brat, so the soft skills came fairly easy. My father demanded it every day. Yes, sir, no, sir. Yes, ma'am, no, ma'am. And we moved around a lot. So I had the benefit of meeting a lot of different folks from a lot of different communities and diversity and so forth. So I felt like that was a huge asset for me, especially now as an adult. If you don't ask, you don't get. My staff's heard me say that all the time. If you don't ask, you don't get. I told my boys, I said, if you don't ask, you don't get. Somebody once taught me that. I said, by the way, that's what JA means, just asking. Okay? And Scott knows this because I'm always just asking. I tell my boys I love them every day. You got to tell people you're proud of them. You got to get off of the I can't. And you got to start telling them they can. And that's what I was taught. That's why I love what I do at JA. That's why I think this job is so important. It found me. I didn't find it, which I loved about that. Just you get too caught up on focusing on the problem and not on the solution. You got to focus on the solution. What's the solution? Let's come up with a solution. And that's what I love about this meeting today and what we're doing. And to speak to Angela and I were talking earlier, you got to take action. And I was taught that if you're going to say something, then you need to do it. So it's about taking action. So,
Thank you so much, Trent. Sabrina?
The question as it relates to success, I feel from my response is going to be what keeps me motivated. We were taught nouns in school, people, places, things. And it is important, what keeps me motivated is finding the relationship between people, places, and things. What is it a negative relationship? It is a positive relationship. Am I adding value? Is it adding value? Me being a counselor and talking to people about finances, which is very personal, and they trust that I do want to understand, and that trust then allows them to open up and share details with me that is not only related to money, but the decisions that they make as it relates to money. Why do you do what you do? So understanding is everything, and that's why it's important that we share with our kids what we know. It doesn't matter if we think the time is now or tomorrow. Share with them what you know. So that's my response.
Thank you so much. Clifton?
Yeah, I began by telling you that I was just a kid from the tobacco fields of North Carolina. I grew up on a 300-acre tract of farmland, and that's when I learned at an early age that the only people that like to work is a mule and a fool. But working on that farm, allowed me, to spend a lot of time, with family members and people in the community, that poured into me and talked to me constantly, and gave me the values, that I needed, to be successful. And so, it was, always a conversation of here's what you can expect. When I got ready to go to middle school, the kids in the community before me and my cousins and my aunties, before me was saying, here's what you can expect. Here's how you need to govern yourself. Here's how you're representing the family, right? When I got ready to go to high school, we looked forward to going to that high school because, there was a sense, to the community school, and there was a sense of heritage and pride in doing so. And the best advice, that I got, from a mentor, was make sure that everything that you do and the work that you do work as though you were working unto the Lord. And failure is not an option. And so I have always carried that with me, and it has served me well. And I am excited to be able to pour that into my children and my grandchildren so that they can have the foundation that they need to be successful. Because at the end of the day, they will all end up kind of at the same place.
Well, thank you so much. Let's give a round of applause to our panelists. And now, I'd like to call Corey back to conclude our statement.
Thanks, David. So with that being said, what's next, right? What's next? So when you look at these three companies, and when you look at what you have below you in your seat, it says startup. It says the Youth Economic Empowerment Alliance. That's what's next, right? So when you think of these three organizations that have partnered together, you have Citizens Bank, right? You have the oldest African-American owned bank in the country. We are the leader in serving the underserved and the other banks, whether it be small business or consumer, or any organization or any consumer that wants to support that cause. That's who Citizens Bank is. That's what we are, right? It might not be the shiniest, but it's the most needed, all right? You also have Pinnacle. They're the leader in this community, in the Nashville community, in the financial arena, all right? And then you have JA, which, of course, is the leader in connecting education, the curriculum, the everything that they do over here, with the students. And so the last partnership that we want to bring to this is, of course, Metro Public Schools. And so the goal of this conversation, the next step, is to partner with Metro Public Schools, because what we want to happen is we want this curriculum that you see in this packet to be in every single middle school in Metro Nashville. And we want to start with the Pearl Cone cluster, which is 37208, and then also the Whites Creek cluster. That is the mission of this. We won't stop until it gets done. We think it's that important. All right? With that being said, I thank everybody for coming out, spending a little bit of your time with us. For anybody that wants to stick around, we're going to give you a tour. This facility is phenomenal. If you haven't seen it before, go check out BizTown and then Finance Park. Sit around, mingle, and we appreciate your time, and there is more to come. Thank you.